Hey, so this is the map. Basically, I've got it to the right angle and zoom to fit everything in. It may be possible to do it a bit closer up. I sent the Earl anyway, so that should take you to the right place, but on the desktop computer, not on the phone, because it needs to be a landscape way around. So, I'll actually just copy that now, because I might have to zoom out. So, where we actually are, whoop, so that's England this way around, yeah? So you can see, like, this is kind of upside down, looking, it's actually looking towards Stonehenge, down the island, actually, from this particular view. There's Cornwall and Wales and London, so we're sort of upside down. So this river here, yeah? So we've got this really wide river that comes in from Hull, which is in the prehistoric times on that prehistoric map. That there's one that shows a map of England in prehistoric times when it was all water. Remember that water irrigation was a patent, and they used water irrigation to get rid of a lot of water from the land. It's particularly out in the east in Lincolnshire. They dug a lot of channels and things like that, and then you've got all the modern underground sewer relief system. So there's a lot of water being removed. And then if you think about the canals took even more water from the river levels and filled the canals up with that, we've lost even more. So, I mean, a lot of this side was watery, and also all London, if you go look on that Prehistoric Britain website on the prehistoric map, water maps, both sides of the Thames, quite a lot, is all water. And that's why there wasn't a major... When the Romans came over, there wasn't we didn't really have a settlement in London historically in the past, because this side is low down and this side's all mountainy. So, I mean, we know that Dover's closest to the land there. Why they didn't have loads and loads and loads of hill forts here and populate it to defend it from there, the land, and why the hill forts were mainly on here and Cornwall with all the tin and resources. Well, the thing is, a lot of the cairns and sites are mainly around the coastline, particularly Wales and Scotland. I mean, we've got the Cotswold 7 group, and, you know, there's Avebury and Stonehenge, but we do have hill forts around the middle, not really over that side because it's flatter. But a lot of the travel was around the coastline. And the thing is, when you get used to travelling distances, like, you know, I'm going like this, I'm travelling, you're getting used to travelling a lot of distance on water, but you can hug the coast and never be that far from land and travel a lot of distance. So when you're used to travelling around the coastline and delivering flint and things from like Sisbury Ring Hill Fort and other things around, you're used to travelling on water. So like you're travelling, hugging the coastline and then just changing diversion and going across. It's not that much of a big deal even there when you're used to coming round and round and round and round. So like you're coming round and round and round and round and then just go doop and then jump across. So it didn't really matter whether it was only that distance or that distance to these people, because they're just used to go long distances along. So, you know, it didn't make that much difference. Now, if the Romans did come in this way and go capture King Cole at Colchester and then take him up to the Brigantes, which is up by us, that would give strategic reason why I didn't come in this way if there were loads and loads and loads of hill forts on there, you know, protecting it. Unless they had like a deal with them and they were going to overthrow the rest of the country because all the resources, we don't know. But it would seem that if it was true to the Gaelic Wars in respects of strategy, that's why they didn't come in there, because that's where the defences were. And there isn't on that, in the hill forts map, there are not many hill forts here, you see, really at all. So it would have been easier for them to come in this way. So, in respect to this, what's significant about this river is that here, right, in the middle, I know we've got hills in Cumbria, I know we've got hills in North Yorkshire there, but the thing about our hills here, in between Manchester and Huddersfield and the Peak District, they are decent sized hills, and it is the right altitude for, if you look on the biodiversity maps, right, it's very, very consistent coverage of sacrament growing there, of liberties. And we know that they grow other places, and we know there are lots of different varieties, but it isn't really very sparse this side. And so it's got there are some areas where there are little bits of stronger growth, but generally for coverage, this is a hotspot. And it's the fact that it's the river. So the river actually starts in the Pennines, and this is when all the water gathers on the moors and then forms into the river and then comes all the way along. And actually, at one point back in history, you could even sail to Scunthorpe and then go to Nottingham on the river. It was connected to Nottingham Caves. I don't know if you could get both ways or not, but if you look on it, you can do. Now, the thing is that this kind of hills and the sort of formation of the water and then it sort of channeling into a river and going to the sea here, it's kind of symbolic. And the fact that we've got a lot of sacrament growth. Now, I just want to draw, at this stage, I want to draw a comparison to Ireland, and we'll keep the same kind of latitude or longitude, whatever it is, across in line with this river, right? So we're talking roughly in the centre of the island, like very, very central, and then you can sail all the way to the sea and then go around, from there, and you can deliver all around the coast, particularly when all the long barrows and cairns, if they were part of the little religious order, they are mainly around the coast, particularly Wales, Cornwall, Scotland. So delivery and access, Scotland's got its own, main supplies. But the thing is, it is a good area to supply. Just like Shanktonbury Ring and Cisbury Ring were two hill forts together at Worthing, and they were on that hill fort. They were mining and quarrying flint and living there and supplying it to England, and likely around the coastal routes. It was just a convenient place where they could knock it out from, and they could get it delivered around quite easily. Not to say that you can't get flint in other places, but it was just a good place for it. So, they made a bit of a base for flint. Now, so in line with this line here, so if we go across past the Isle of Man, so we're exactly in line now, and Drogheda, where the river is here, this is, it's almost like, it's almost like a bit of a carbon copy across, but just not as much distance into the middle, a shorter distance. And then you've got, see, you've got Newgrange here, which is the river going to the sea, the bridge over the ford at Drogheda, right? So you've got a river here, but this is not where the actual river starts. It obviously starts further back. But with this symbolic mouth of the river, you see Newgrange, Knowth and Dowth are massive. They're like the main places in Ireland. They're huge. And there are a lot of cairns and a lot of temples and a lot of long barrow things in Ireland. But these, Newgrange, Knowth and Dowth, are three circular shaped. And they're all in the same complex and they're next to the river. And see, look, you've got Newgrange, Knowth, and Dowth is there, but Dowth is pretty much been, there's not that much left of it. But this is where the river goes round them. Now, they're all round, and Knowth has got loads of little ones around it. It's almost like a mother with loads of babies around it, like a round circle with all the little baby mounds around it. And they're all circular. Knowth, Dowth, and Newgrange were all circular, and you could go inside them, enter them, and I think that's kind of like a bit of a female kind of symbolism, really. And actually, this is upside down, but the river goes underneath them all. So, and the thing with Ireland is it's actually not as elongated as Britain. You see, Ireland itself is kind of more evenly shaped, kind of like Northgrove and Newgrange, and all around circular shaped monuments. Whereas England, with Scotland in one piece, the island, is almost itself an elongation. It's actually more like a long barrow compared to a round cairn. It is like Britain is itself could be symbolised as a long barrow, and Ireland could be like the Newgrange shape, more rounder, you know? Now, the thing, what's significant with that, other than the rivers being pretty much on the same, like that goes inwards to our site, and that one goes inwards to Newgrange. It's almost like male and female in a way. So, if we go back here, so there's the river where it's really wide, and then comes in through Castleford. So here we've got, in the middle of the island, more or less centrally, but just down a little bit, we've got these hills, and on the side of Manchester, really far back in prehistoric time, before irrigation, that was all floodplains and water. So Manchester hasn't really got that much prehistory going back really, really far, because it was all floodlands, which is kind of funny with the Oasis kind of monkey, isn't it? Oasis are from Manchester, and it was kind of all water floodplains. So that's why, out of both why would we have some significance to our area, and there was something in our area and not Manchester? Just because there was water over there. Now, if you look at those ancient prehistoric maps, there was actually a lot of lakes in these hills, even some bigger lakes than what are in the Lake District now. Even though these aren't quite as high up as the Lake District, there was actually a lot of lakes in here. So when we get to this band here, we just happen to have, at this side of the Pennines, which form this ridge, we've got this beautiful kind of valley, which is kind of like a bit of a basin, you know. And I do think Tolkien based Mordor on it, but he ended up making it bad instead of good. And Marsden was Morden, which is like for big. You know, Marsden was actually called Morden, and he's a little bit like Mordor. And actually, before the 1700s, this whole area wasn't like all built up with Leeds, Bradford, Halifax, and it's ended up getting smoggy and urban and polluted, almost like the toxic smog of Mordor. And Huddersfield is kind of half got urbanised now, and the other half just happens to be countryside, like around Home Firth. So we've got this kind of the sort of more flat, leveler meadows come over. Obviously, it's the further you get to the sea, the more flatter it is, and then as you get to here, you've got beautiful kind of valleys and meadows, and then it starts going. So it starts going uphill gradually, and then you've got the moors, right? And it is if you get any higher than this, you actually lose biodiversity growth because it's kind of too high up altitude, you know. And it's kind of just like a height here where you've got like really good growth. And the funny thing is that the altitude at one of these sites I'm going to show you, which is not a patch on the top, just when you come off the moors, is actually the same altitude as the top of the Carrowkeel cairns in the Wicklow Hills in Ireland. And funnily enough, it's around the same altitude as where the White Horse is as well, before you go up onto there at Uffington, which is kind of interesting. So as the river comes across from Hull and Scunthorpe and Castleford, it comes through Dewsbury and Mirfield, and then now I've got it to just about where we were when I started. So when it gets to here, this point here, when it's come round from there, it actually makes like a little triangle shape, which I kind of like. It kind of reminds me of Newgrange, really. You know the picture of this triple spiral on the wall at Newgrange? You've got this little triangle. And here is actually Robin Hood's grave, which is about 1100s or whatever. But there's not much there. And we actually think that it's the story of him shooting an arrow and where it lands is going to be buried is actually really symbolic of this huge mound here, which was known about, but now has sort of kind of been hidden and covered up, which I'll talk about in a minute. So I kind of want, I think I want the bottom left corner of the map maybe to have this on it, but I wouldn't mind a little bit of a zoom out box showing maybe whereabouts this area that we're looking at is on the island, if you know what I mean, like I just showed you earlier. But maybe just like kind of like in a separate little diagram or something, because I can't really draw the whole thing going to the sea because then it kind of would be zoomed out too much. So the area that we're interested in from this little triangle river is not this bottom one that comes off towards Brighouse. I'm not really too bothered about where my hand is there. It's mainly the other section that comes up from here. So I kind of want to include that just to show the river's coming in, and then a bit goes off down there. But I'm not really that interested in where my hand is now. It's more this one that comes off it. And I've sent you a picture, and I've done some bits in blue which show there's like a couple of little systems that come from Marsden and Meltham and this way, and it actually goes on here. That's where Huddersfield Town Centre is now. So it's kind of like this river that comes out of these hills. So what we've got with this area, well, this is the current motorway that isn't even really that old, that goes to between Leeds and Manchester, right? Now this here, where my finger's pointing, that's uphill. I know it's showing the actual hills there, but all this is sort of like a ridge, really. They built the motorway on the top of a ridge, and this side of the ridge here goes down into Brighouse and Elland, and then when you're on this side of the ridge, it goes down there towards Huddersfield, but then you've got then it goes back up again, and you've got Castle Hill, the hill fort, is here, which we'll get to in a minute. And I'll show you some photos of it. When you're actually looking from here that way, you've basically got the hill fort here, and it stands up right in the middle of here. It's kind of almost got a ring, a valley around it like a donut, but not completely exactly circular. But you can there's a valley which I've done a video of, which you fly up the left-hand side of it here, a beautiful valley. But when you're looking from this way, it's really majestic right in the middle. And then behind it, you've got these hills here, which is, we think that Tolkien, because there's got the Victoria Tower on it, we think that he kind of based that Mordor Tower with the Magic Mountain next to it, kind of loosely based on it. But he did it for the bad guys' land, which is a bit upsetting, really, because it is a beautiful area. It is almost like a shire when you get over these mountains. Although, like, he was from... He was at Oxford University, wasn't he? And he loved all ancient sites like Uffington White Horse and Wayland Smith, Longbarrow, with the camp and the Dragon Hill. So he was into all that, and he did like it. The thing with Uffington is everything's preserved. It's got the hill fort with the Longbarrow, with the horse, with the little Dragon Hill, and the Ridgeway. And in a way, I mean, we've got ridgeways all the way on here and on there. So we've got ridgeways here, and we've got hill forts. Now, the slightly different thing about our area now, when I zoom in a bit closer, is that, so here's Almondbury. Now, I think most of this will have been forest, and when you get to the edge of the, you get pine trees as well growing on the way up before you get onto the very top bits that are quite heathery and barrenish. They've got that very, very thick, coarse, kind of heather sort of growth on them. So at Almondbury, which is like Almondsbury to give alms, it sort of originates from giving alms, ALMS, like as in like giving religious alms. So I've got to like peek from the other side of my phone now. Right, so where the mouse is now, right? So there is the hill fort, and it's kind of like it's like being on a giant boat at the moment. It feels like you're on a giant boat, like the Ark when you're on it, or it's like an eye looking up at the sky. But those fortifications are supposedly meant to have only been done following 1066 conquest. William the Conqueror and De Lacy was supposed to reshape them, and they used to be. What my interpretation of this site is, being a local, is that it is not like the other hill forts in England, right? It actually is a giant, massive long barrow. There's no doubt about it. It is a huge long barrow, very beautifully standing out prominent. And when you look at it from straight on, from over this side, it looks even, almost like Silbury Hill, like symmetrical. But when you look from it from the sides, it most definitely is a long barrow. But I think that if you consider that they used to be called the Brigantes tribe, and Brigantes is like the god Bridget, and like a bridge is a pier or an elongation or a mast or pole. So that's what long barrows are. A long barrow is essentially an elongation. And I actually think that it's quite symbolic of the male, you know. Now, the thing with Newgrange, Noath and Dowth all being circular structures that you go inside, like massive versions of, say, like Uli Long Barrow, which is like Hetley Pegler's Tuft, and that Core Valley Cairn on Isle of Man, which is also female as well, with the kind of knobble over the hole. It's like very, very, very sort of feminine evocative, whereas the long barrows are very, very male evocative. Now, the thing with usually the long barrows, some of the long barrows you can go inside, and some of them you can't. But some of them are like have like false blocked entrance, you know, like Bellassinac. But the thing with this is, I think it's you don't enter the male organ, do you? You don't go inside it. The male organ goes inside someone else. The female organ is the one that you go inside. The male one is kind of either rubbed on or against or whatever. So the fact, I think it's symbolic that it's like a massive, huge long barrow, and like they're actually on top of it, like walking around on top of it, is kind of like symbolic to, so like rubbing in a way. So that's why I think that they actually lived on top of it, and it's not an entered site. So I'm kind of thinking, I don't know whether to have like little round huts on it, or a little village or whatever, or whether some sort of I see it as the Druid kind of headquarters, really. And then I kind of see it now as, well, if we've got an organisation of loads and loads and loads and loads of long barrows all around the coast, well, where's the headquarters? Well, I think the headquarters might have been in the middle of the island, in the centre, and then obviously the water going to the sea is obviously like, travelling on the tubes, you know what I mean? And obviously the river is kind of born and flows out from these hills and gradually forms. Now, the thing is, there's not just one giant long barrow, because when we go over here to Meltham, and that reservoir there wasn't there before, they kind of writ it off. We've got Helm, which is kind of short for helmet. We've actually got another long barrow hill here, which at the moment no one acknowledges it for having anything on. But if you look at it, it's kind of smooth now, and it is perfectly the shape of something. And the fact there's Castle Hill, which is the same shape, it's just kind of like a no-brainer. If you look at Dragon Hill now, next to Uffington Camp, it's just bare top and smooth. It doesn't look like anything was on it, and no one's telling us, you know, this hut or that hut was on it or anything. So I kind of think that I kind of see it in the same condition as Dragon Hill, you know. Now the thing with this one at Meltham at Helm is that all around it and alongside it here, I've done actually a video on it when I go on site. This is kind of like coming downhill here, and it's all absolutely perfect, prime, kind of like cultivation grounds for Liberties, really. It's almost as if they've got like an allotment running at the side of it, or even in a ring around it, like a fairy ring, and it's the perfect altitude. And it's actually not the top of this long barrow shape, natural long barrow shape here, but around it here, that is around the same altitude as Uffington White Horse, you know, and also the Carrowkeel cairns, which is very significant, because when you get up to the top of the moors, it's higher. And we're just like, you step off the moors and then you got this. So I kind of want to get these two, this and Castle Hill, which is actually, this is kind of a little bit more hidden and a little bit less conspicuous, even though we're sort of kind of gaining altitude. And then at Marsden, Morden, which is kind of, Marsden is like, you know, actually kind of in the moors. We've got this Pool Hill here, and when you actually stood up on the top of this West Nab, when you go up to West Nab to the top part from Meltham, I don't know if there was any cairns on here or not. Probably like didn't even need cairns if you've got these things. But when you actually look over here, Pool Hill itself is actually like a further natural, massive, giant long barrow, and that kind of signifies for Marsden being Morden, big den. It's actually kind of like, you know, the hills themselves are kind of all natural shit long barrows, and you actually get the growing actually on it, and all on the moors. You know, obviously giving and taking the height. And actually, when you get onto this Pool Hill, just over the top of this West Nab Ridge, you can actually see Castle Hill exactly just at the perfect level, a line of sight, but you can't quite see the Meltham Helm one, Dunelm one, because it's a little bit lower down. But I would kind of like to somehow get the correct general contours of this landscape. It's a bit difficult to see it on Google Earth, because from this M62 it kind of goes down into the valley and comes back up again, but I kind of think that this would have all have been trees except for around the river and the top of the moors, and then kind of like pine forests around coming off the hills, maybe some oak groves here and there. And then this is like the kind of like important bit. So we've got these rivers, and they go past both of the long barrows, this river, and there's like the other one that branches off. And then as we come past where Castle Hill is and come back on the river towards when I said that triple triangle, so you want to like note that point there now, because this is a little bit of a channel coming this way, but not really, really deep. It's showing actually that on the ancient floodplains, as well as the river being a lot wider, they're coming down from here because the canal hasn't taken the water and they want as much irrigation. It's like showing a wider river, and it's saying that there was this little broken stream here formed a river, and actually some of this water filled in this bit here. So there was actually a triangle shape here as well, and it's actually showing it all around this area. And it kind of makes it look like maybe this... Now, this is the third out of these three sites. But unlike Newgrange, Knowth and Dowth being closer together, almost like if Ireland was a female shape and symbolised a female, and almost like Knowth, Dowth and Newgrange are all huddled a bit closer together, and there's all the smaller ones around Knowth, you know, it's got all the little barrows around it, almost like, you know, kids around the mum, you know, and then it's next to the river, but the river, it's almost like these long ones, the male-shaped ones, are spaced out a little bit further between each other, you know, And what does the male shape do? It kind of goes into grooves and nooks and crannies, and then you've got all these channels and valleys, and it's almost like then you go on the river and then off on the voyage, exploratory sort of thing to it as well. But the thing about this third one is it's actually aligned the exact same direction as Old Oswestry points in. It's actually the exact shape as a Liberty Cap, which is even more significant. Unlike the other two are like definitely absolute perfect massive long barrows, this is Liberty Cap shaped, and the point of it, when you line it up with Old Oswestry, it points in the exact same direction, and it's not quite as big though. It's actually smaller area on the top, but generally the same, and that's why I think that it is or was a hill fort. It may have been bigger and it may have had surrounding fortifications like Old Oswestry, and at some point it might have had them dug out and been changed into a burial mount shape, either when Castle Hill got burned at some point. We're not sure. Maybe because Castle Hill and Dunelm are slightly different to your average hill fort, maybe because they are giant long barrows and possibly could be the base for all the other long barrows. It makes me wonder whether this actually, therefore, wasn't like Old Oswestry around it on the perimeter, maybe because it's very, 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 very steep sides, kind of like Silbury Hill kind of thing, but way bigger. So kind of wondering if it actually was just like kind of like huge burial mound shape and symbology and not needing kind of rippled edges. But the name for it is Warrior's Tomb, the old name, the oldest name we've got for it. And it's not that long ago since they actually, you see, here's the river. It's not that far from the river at all. Like Newgrange is near the river, Newgrange, Noth and Dove are near the river, except obviously when you've got the map the right way around, the river flows underneath Newgrange, Noth and Dove perfectly, but this river flows over the top of these sites, on the other side of it. But it's really close to the river here, and I actually think that maybe it might have actually had water around it, and it could have even been an island in the middle of the water. When you've got on The Hobbit, when they've got, when they go to the Dragon's Mountain and they've got that town on the lake almost, and then you could walk down the rampart pathway, and then you just get on the water and get on a boat. Theoretically, if this bit was flooded here and connected to the river, in theory you'd just walk down the ramp, get straight onto a boat, sail down here, and then you're away straight to the sea and then all around the island. So it's almost like hopping off straight onto, you're literally hopping straight off this site, and you've got a direct route to the sea, and it's kind of concealed because it goes back, and this bit here is kind of like down hidden, almost like the Liberties are hidden in the grass. You've got to try and find them in the grass. So this bit goes down here. But the reason I didn't do it is because I won't mind getting some of the terrain in here, but you've kind of got to know it. And when the map's kind of fixed, you can't really see it. But when you start moving it around like this, you get to see the kind of terrain a little bit. You see, they had the Great Yorkshire before, because see, they built the ICI here, the Imperial Chemical Industries. My granddad used to work there. I never even knew it stood for Imperial Chemical Industries. It was always ICI. Turns out it's Imperial Chemical Industries. Where did they dump it? Right on this junction here. So kind of a bit upsetting, because before all this urban sprawl, they were having the Yorkshire Show here, just in the middle of this kind of valley here, which is just near that. So they did acknowledge it at one point, but then when they got Emily Moore Mast banged up, and then when they it's almost like we've kind of have turned into Mordor, really. It's a bit unfortunate. Look at all this. I've got photographs of when this is all fields, and it ain't that long ago. They've protected Maiden Castle and Old Oswestry and Uffington Camp, and then they've actually built houses on top of it now. And that was around the time I was born, actually. Maybe I'm trying to find out the date from the council now. And they've actually, the street is in the shape of a D for like Duns. It's actually it actually is a Liberty Cap shape, and they've put a letter D on it. So it's almost like having a Duns put on you. But then they went and built Emily Moore Mast, like kind of over that way, which is like the tallest building in Europe, and it is almost like a massive wizard's tower. But they've gone and rubbished the actual original old heritage site and built it all up, and we're just hanging on with skin of his teeth from Castle Hill because it's creeping up to it, and this is what we've been fighting over this cafe. It's almost like the Warlock fight at Mountain. We're having wars about what's going to be on there, because there was a pub on there first from 1700s, like a free house, public house, and then once that Victoria Tower got banged on there, and then more recently they've booted that pub off because this whole area took sides with the parliamentarians, not the royals, you see. So I think because it was associated with the Brigantes when the Romans came over and established Eboracum at York, this was called Elmet, kind of like helmet, and that is actually the shape of a Celtic helmet as well. Also, it's called Agbrig, which suggests the brig house. Or I kind of think that the appropriate name for long barrows actually could be bridge houses. Like it's almost like a bridge made out of earth. And the god Brigantes stood for like poles and masts, beams, projections, which is kind of male. I don't know why it got ended up termed as female. I think that got switched around at some point. So yeah, we've got those three sites. I don't know whether it should have water around it, coming from a bit of a stream this way and then join onto that, or I don't know whether or not it should have forest around it and then it just stand up in the middle, and just be close to the river. I'm not sure. Maybe it could have oak groves down here. I don't know. That's the thing to decide. But so we've definitely got this really huge, massive mound. It's not as big as Oswestry anymore. It could have been the similar size to Oswestry, but it's still it's significant. The thing is that Oswestry kind of goes up in waves, so it kind of lessens the steepness effect of it, So there's Castle Hill up there. I'll send photos so you can see the angles. Now, when you're on the top of here, you can actually just see over this ridge here the exact level top platform just over this horizon. So it's in visual line, and then from there you can actually see Dunelm, and you can actually see that huge Morden, huge natural one, which I don't think that was inhabited, but it suggests that it's kind of max out the sort of kind of picking area, if we want to go with that theory, which I kind of do for this project. So this could have even, I'm not too sure how far back, if you're going back too far to when, but it's definitely showing it on the water map, this bit with water on it. Or if you want to kind of think of it as Newgrange, just near the river coming past. But those three sites, I think that my theory is, or how I would like to portray it, is that these were maybe the Druid supply base for all of the other long barrows around the island, and then they went by sea, by the river route, and then all around the perimeter. Obviously, each area can get its own, but that's to say, why did Cis Brewing and Shankton Brewing at Worthing, they were knocking out flint and axe heads from there, and we found them all over the island, so it just was a good supply and convenient. And I think that's the same with this. I don't think this is like the only place, but it's got symbology with the river in the heart of the island and going out. It's almost like a very, very similar to Ireland. It's almost like the length of England is like the male and Ireland's a female, and the long barrows, kind of seem symbolic to that. I know there are some long barrows that you can go inside, but then again, some of those the smaller round sites have got like those standing stones inside them, like Anglesey, and there's one on Guernsey, that's a round female shape, and you go inside it, enter it, but it's actually got the kind of male phallic standing stone inside it. So maybe there was some crossover, It seems to me like if there was like a set of male sites or a male order, there would be the phallic shape, and if there was a female order and some female sites, there would be the round shape where you enter, and the headquarters would be apparently symbolic to that, and it would look like it would be Newgrange and Noath, But maybe there was a bit of crossover between it. maybe they had multiple different sacraments, you know, if you want to go into amanitas or other things that people don't want to talk about or disclose. But I think this area is definitely symbolic of, you know, the liberties, mainly for the fact that that is the shape of it, and it's not under, you know, and it's well known, you know, that it's psilocybin is used as religious sacraments, and we've got all that connection anyway, you know. And one of the main missions of the Romans was to completely remove and eradicate that entire order, basically. And I think that's why it gets a bit attacked, really, in a way. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, because in one way they put in the massive Emily Moore transmitter mast, you know, which you should be able to see it now, actually, but maybe it's... Oh, there's the shadow of it there. That's the shadow. Don't know why I can't see it. I'll show you photos. And then we get the Imperial Chemical Industries, and we get the Victoria Tower on there, but we get actually banged urban. I mean, how can you do archaeology or anything like that? And the thing is, this was a beautiful valley with the view of the Pennines in the background. So it's kind of upsetting that it's kind of been vandalised in a way, and the fact that we get kind of rubbished with that Mordor tag, you know, and you know it all Ravensthorpe and, you know, Dewsbury and Batley now are all kind of urban sprawl and smoggy, and with, you know, there were a hell of a lot of immigrants. I mean, we did get targeted for immigration, really. I mean, you could say, you know, if you want to say, well, when immigration happened, it just got evenly spread equally all over the country. It's kind of almost like they got dropped, they got a crosshair out and targeted our area, you know, and it is a bit ironic. I don't really want to have to say it, but it needs to be acknowledged and mentioned that, you know, it's kind of like more through the door, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? And they've got like Mordor in Lord of the Rings. It is a bit upsetting to talk about it, but it is significant, really, you know. When it was very beautiful by these Pennine Hills, really. So I kind of want to get these hills in. I want to do it from this side. I know it's kind of like look the wrong way around, but you know, it's. I think that it's a good layout for the river and to show like the hill forts from the side view, and then when they went at the top, and then that there in the river, and then the forests and everything. I kind of think that at this zoom to fit that in there doesn't really matter too much about down there, but like the edge of the mountains, and maybe show that they don't, they kind of, they're only like a bandwidth there. They don't carry on after this kind of like a, and then get a lot of the major contours in around, because this is not totally flat here. It's kind of, I mean, it's just kind of, it's complicated because you've got this ridge coming up here which goes down to Ellen, and then it goes back down, and then it is almost like a valley here, and then these channels. But the thing is, I want the sites. That's why I like that map that I showed you with the Lord of the Rings, not Lord of the Rings, with the Fighting Fantasy map, the Ian Jackson and the Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone map, because it kind of has enlarged, exaggerated sites, you know, that are really charactered in, and like the kind of, you can see them and see what they are and see relatively where they are in position to the landscape. But you know, but if you do it in actual scale, like look how tiny that is, you can't even really see it. So you know, it's kind of like a bit of a trade-off for scale. You know, what scale can I draw this while still keeping the context of its position in the landscape and relation to the other places. You know, it is a vale, really. It is a shire. And also, I'd like to. It would be cool to do one for Ireland as well. But I actually think it might be interesting to do like also at the side of the map a square zoomed out. You know, with the you know, showing, you know, where it is on the island, you know, with the Humber coming in like that, and where the hills are, whereabouts it is, and in relation to Stonehenge, which is over here. The funny thing about that biodiversity map, and this is what the biodiversity experts are saying on the map, Stonehenge in Wiltshire is it doesn't have biodiversity for magic mushrooms really compared to everywhere else, unless they haven't done it correct. But being professionals, so it seems to me like even though they set up Avebury and Stonehenge and all these, you know, West Kennet, it's not got the natural biodiversity if we're figuring that particular sacrament. You know, there are other sacraments or not a different matter, but, you know, so I think that they were delivering around the coast, and it is one of the sacraments, at least for baptism, you know, it's like spiritual experience, that's for certain. There are entire Facebook groups on that, you know, like psychedelic art is everything and that, and we've got other cultures that back it, support it, like South America. You know, so that's kind of what I want to try and show for our area. Like, you know, it would be cool to sort of kind of, you know, there are other, you know, you've got North Yorkshire Moors, you've got North Pennines, you've got Lake District, but according to those ancient river and floodplain maps, this is really high up in the Lake District, but the size of the lakes are not as big as what the size of the lakes actually were around here, even though it's not quite as high up. There were actually larger lake areas in between there. So, and then Scotland's a different story, you know. But that's kind of it. I'll send some photos over so you can sort of get an idea about the sites.